Ashe family, welcome back to another episode of My Unapologetic Perspective. This is the podcast where we give our point of view on controversial topics from our experience, black history, and our knowledge as African Americans. Black history presently lives in us so we can continue to excel into the future. It's one thing to know black history, it's another thing to take advantage of what the people in black history did for you. I am your host, Martre Baker Stevens. To the right of me is Shaquan Battle.
It's me. Hello.
And to the right of him is Jerome Battle.
What's up?
Appreciate the love and support we've been getting. Shout out to our new subscribers. Shout out to the Shadow Band Network on YouTube. Go type them in. Follow them. They send a lot of traction over here to our channel. We appreciate all the love and support. For the people who don't know, they see us. This is a father-son podcast. I know my last name might have been is different, so it might have threw y'all off. But this is two sons and a father, basically doing a Black History podcast. So the first time listeners, last time listeners, welcome.
That's right.
I read one of the comments on the video that I think he said that you needed to get a shape up before you recorded. But the comeback was funny though, because what you said something about the content on this page.
Yeah, if you click on this page, there's number twerk videos.
That's what
And I'm like, you telling me to present myself in a way, but when I click on your page, it looks totally different. And I was woofing at the time. I've said that I was woofing. I was trying to get my joint up. My barber told me to woof so I can be able to get my stuff the way it's supposed to look.
Hey, but if you can't say nothing about how somebody look on a video when we go to your page and you got girls on there twerking,
man. Listen to the information.
That's what I was laughing at. But what was the last episode or the episode before last when we were talking about Kai?
Last episode.
Yeah. Well, you see, he just did last weekend. He did the stream with Drewski and Kevin Hart.
Yeah.
Let me ask y'all a question. So Chris Rock, I was a little, maybe preteen or maybe just got to my teens for his stand-ups. Do y'all miss when comedians would give you real life shit in their bits? Like Dave Chappelle, his bits were true.
Yeah.
You don't really get that from today's comedians where you can learn about oppression through a black comedian.
The thing is, today's comedians aren't necessarily groomed as starting as comedians. They start as content creators. Mm-hmm. So they was just creating skits and became internet sensations to the point where people laughed at their material, to the point now they're in the transition of becoming comedians. You know, when you think of a comedian, you think of people who start off in those hole in the walls and they're perfecting their jokes, they're perfecting their craft, they're telling stories. These are people who are just naturally funny, and now they have to create the avenue to go from being a content creator to a real life comedian. Because they do. You look at people like Desi and some of those people, Rennie, that you follow on Instagram. They do stand up. But most of the time, you never see them post videos from those stand-ups because you know they're just learning how to perfect their craft from being funny to being a comedian. I think those are two separate things.
Yeah, you also have social media. It plays a huge part now. Is that before you could do a set in California, you can do that same set 2 days later in Chicago. Nobody heard it before.
Yeah.
Now you do a set in California, and you go to do a set the next day, everybody's already seen it.
Yeah.
Because of social media. So it makes it a little more difficult now for comedians because they have to come up with new material on a regular basis. The other thing is with being able to post videos and you have access to this, you also have people stealing your set. They're stealing your jokes, and they're doing them now, and then it gets to a point of trying to figure out who did it first, who stole whose joke. So before, comedians were, like Bake said, naturally funny. They would tell their life story because guess what? Most people's story was a little bit different depending on where you lived. So your material was always going to be a little different than everybody else's, and they weren't going to hear it the next day. So you could go, you could do 13, 14 cities before anybody ever heard your joke, anybody that hadn't heard it previously. So it was like a new joke for 13, 17, 18, ever how many cities you did in the course of a tour, and it was all fresh jokes to them, and you
Yeah.
could do the same set every night.
I guess also people worried about their brands nowadays, so you don't want to be like Dave Chappelle could do a 30-minute stand-up smoking a cigarette and talking about something one thing that happened to a black person from a white person, where these new comedians not going to do that because of brand deals and all of these things.
For me, I just we talk about Chris Rock. We talk about somebody who was genuinely funny, But now, whenever you mention Chris Rock, people are taking sides on whether you're pro Will Smith or pro Chris Rock, right? Now it's not even about being comedians anymore. Most people forgot that Will was a comedian. Most people forgot that. He's been an actor. Most people forgot that he was a rapper. So he's been an actor for so long. People forgot a lot of those things. But it's not even about the comic side of it. Now it's about who do you side with in this situation. So sometimes hearing Chris Rock talk becomes political. Same thing with Dave Chappelle. Dave Chappelle is extremely smart, and he's funny too. But most of the time you listen to him, most of his skits now are political, not necessarily, or educational, not necessarily meant to make you laugh. They just happen to be funny the way that he tells stories.
Right.
So I guess when you look at comic relief now, it's totally different than what it used to be.
Because you'll never see Kevin Hart do that.
No, and I think the other thing too that I don't like, and I think this is something that Dave Chappelle talks about too, is I don't like when comedians talk negative about what other comedians do, right? And if when Martin Lawrence wore a dress on Martin's show, do you think we were thinking about the fact as a black man he shouldn't have to do that to be funny? No, we weren't thinking about that. We were thinking about somebody was doing a character that we knew was a man doing the character, and it was funny. Why all of a sudden does it have to be about them putting on the dress and demeaning the statue of a black man? It was something he chose to do, not something somebody asked him to do. That's different. Now, if you're going up for a role and they're saying, what would be really funny, what would be really good for this role if you put on the dress, that's different.
Now, do you think that kind of correlated with white America seeing that and then wanting to keep the dress on him? So for Martin to, let's just say, Big Mama's House 1, right? We know that Big Mama's House 2 and 3 wasn't necessary. We understand what Martin went through after before Run Tell That, when he started talking about the industry and all of those things, and then collapsed and then came back. And it was like the only avenue for Martin at the time was to really put on a dress, to a point where that may have came a Hollywood thing, is for certain black actors to be able to make it through, that they have to put on a dress now to feminize the black man.
And I agree with that, but let's talk about this in terms of other things, right? So that's one thing. So, but nobody had a problem with actors, black actors, playing roles that they get cornholed into, sort of like
The black stereotype roles.
Yeah. So for Cole on Martin, right? An idiot. We're okay with that. We're okay with, on the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Carlton. We're okay with his role. We have no problem with that role, right? We have no problem with roles like Money Mike. We have no problem with black people playing pimps. We have no problem with those roles. But we have a problem when you make them put on the dress. So for me, it's about, if you're going to look at it from that perspective, then you got to look at everything, right? It's okay when we play idiots. It's okay when we play basketball players. It's okay when we play entertainers. It's not okay when we put on the dress. That's my point is I don't think that you can single out one thing and only look at that and say, this is what somebody, whether it's a group of people, white people, black people, whoever, that's putting us in a different light for our community. It's everything. So I necessarily don't have a problem with somebody putting on the dress, because in your community, in our community, you're going to see black men wearing dresses.
Right.
It's going to happen in everyday life at some point.
And I think that may be the problem. Is it may not be a problem for authentic people to have to do it, but the fact that people feel like it's an agenda now. So for the past 10, 15 years, we want to put this on the screen so the people on the screen can feel comfortable doing this. It's almost like manipulation. So if you see your favorite black actor or black comedian putting this dress on, then little boys are going to think that this is what I want to do. So it's almost like propaganda. So I think the cry out is that it's not the black writers who are doing it anymore. Martin may have wrote it. Certain actors may have wrote it, but like Eddie Griffin said a long time ago, there are people who really, they write the script for you to do this. And there are a lot of black people who came back and said, I wish I wanted to do that. When they did that, RuPaul with, Wesley Snipes playing in the dress. A lot of people say, hey, this may have ended my career at some point.
See, that's the whole point I was getting at. Is when you look at this from the perspective, is it a bad image for the black community, or is it people worried about how it impacted their career?
Well, it impacted their career because the black community no longer looks at them a certain way.
Is that the case, or is it because, again, would I have a problem with somebody putting on the dress more so than I have a problem playing the drug dealer? So we don't want you to wear a dress, but we don't have a problem with you playing the drug dealer, and you're going to see both of them in your community. So for me, playing the drug dealer role is worse for me.
Okay.
So when I think about what the images that we want to portray to the black community or even the young black community, we should be thinking about all aspects. A dress is not the worst thing that can happen to your son. There's so many other things that if we can look at it in terms of white writers, white production, white films. We can look at it in that term. But at the end, there is so many other negative images that we can portray in these movies that are more negatively impactful in our communities than a person putting on a fucking dress.
And that's my
point.
That was my whole problem with what Cat said was when we first got introduced to Cat, he was a pimp.
That's right.
He went on with that for even when he was rapping with what was it, Young Guns or Game that he did. I think it was Game.
What Game when he dissed?
Yeah, he was for a good 4 or 5 year run. He portrayed himself as a pimp.
That's right. I mean, if you think about, I don't know which Friday it was, whichever one that had my man got out of prison, and
Friday After That, okay. Same one. Yeah, same one.
So even in the movie, they joked with his mom about the guy being gay, right? It was like, you realize your son's a punk. You realize, right? They joked about that, but they joke about Money Mike being a pimp. Yeah. You see what I'm saying? I think it's us looking at, and this is just a telltale sign for
normalized. It's normalized.
Exactly. We're looking at things as being normalized, and we accept it. And then the things that we consider not normal, we don't accept it. But they're both negatively impactful in the black community. And we have to stop doing that. We can't say that, oh yeah, you wearing that dress, man, that set us back 100 years. But you playing the pimp, you rock that. Yeah. Right? Come on. We're glorifying something indirectly by doing that. And I don't think we should do that.
I agree. I had a bunch of topics that 20 minutes before we started this, I kind of had some fresh ideas that came. The first part, especially with the new listeners that we have, I want to ask you guys something, because for the people who listening, for the first time listening, the things that we're talking about, we never expected this podcast to go beyond the community. And the reason why we started this podcast was for our particular community and the lack of awareness or education about Black history or just the Black experience altogether. Because for the people who don't know where we come from a little town called Bedford. Me and my brother were born and raised and still lived in Bedford County, Virginia, which is pretty much, I guess you can call it a good old boys town. This is one of those towns that when they tried to integrate the schools, you had the Ku Klux Klan walking in the streets and marching in the streets. It's predominantly white. And this information that we're talking about, a lot of Black people still in our community don't want to openly speak about it. You know what I'm saying? Like, if we put an episode out and we put clips out on social media, a lot of Black people from our community, they'll message us in private and tell us what they feel about what it is that we talked about. I see it at work all the time. If something racist happened or something that makes black people feel uncomfortable, they won't talk about it in front of white people. They'll wait till it's a room of all black people and they'll stop and they say, hey, did you hear that bullshit that they just said? Like, we come from that type of community to where racism is expected, but it's so normal that we just internalize it and keep moving. I'll pose this question to Pops, because you're from DC, you're not from here, but you were raised here. Is that a problem that we look at it that way, being in this community, to the point that we expect our children to go to school and be treated a different way? We expect the people at our jobs to treat us a certain way, and we just kind of like, that's just the way it is here, and we'll move forward.
Absolutely. There's a lot of older black people in this community that has so much a wealth of information regarding history, black history, right here locally, that when you talk, like Beck said, when you talk to them on one-on-one, the first thing in your mind, you say, well, why don't you write a book?
Yeah.
Right? But they all shy away from it. And some of them are well-versed and good communicators, and them telling those stories would be really easy for them to do. The hard part is they've internalized the things that they've witnessed, the people that were negatively impacted by those events. And it is very traumatic for them to speak about those, especially when the other people are listening. They don't feel comfortable doing it. There's nothing that's going to change. When we hear the phrase "stuck in their ways," we seem to think about that in one sense, but it's in every sense of the phrase. When a person's stuck in their ways, they've been accustomed to not talking about those things, and that's not going to change. They definitely aren't going to talk about it in a public forum. They may talk to you one-on-one. Someone else can write the book. But yeah, it's became a way of life for most people. The sad thing is that way of life, it then transferred on to everybody else. The other thing is not just that. There's so many people in our community who does not feel impacted by racism and discrimination until they get the wrist in the handcuffs, right? Once their wrists are in the handcuffs, all of a sudden, I'm being discriminated against, right? Prior to that, and this not demeaning what anybody does, because I used to do it. You think drug dealers give a fuck about racism when they out there selling drugs to their own people? Right. Of course not. I was one of them, right? So of course they don't. Do you think they feel any type of racism when they pull out a gun and shoot it at another black person? No, they're not thinking about that. Only when the wrists are in the handcuffs, all of a sudden, oh yeah, they're doing this to me because I'm black.
Right.
Really? So as much as we screen the race card, there's a lot of times that there is no race card to be played. A lot of it is based on what we consider to be important to us in our community. The other thing is, it's for the people in the community, and again, I know this goes against a lot of codes, right? But I'll be the first to admit I don't know anybody that was killed in Bedford because they snitched on anybody. Just being honest. If somebody knows somebody that was killed in Bedford because they snitched on somebody, hit me up. Let me know, right? So for the black community that always talks about crime and drugs in their community, how many of you go outside when there's a drug deal going down in front of your house and go, move that shit somewhere else? None of you. None of you doing that. But yet we want to blame the white community for things that go on in our community. But we're not taking care of our own community. Even though you don't have full control of your community, we talked about that before, but you certainly have full control of what happens outside of your doorstep. And we don't do that. We don't even come together and do that when somebody in our community is killed.
Right.
So before a lot of things that we do, it is just because we're used to it. This is how it's always been done in our communities, and we fall suit.
Yeah, and a lot of the older people they still go by the old look of things, that they don't want to cause any trouble. So like for the people listening, a lot of times, a lot of these people won't comment on social media. They won't say anything on social media. They won't say anything in front of white people because This is a small community. These are people that you work with. These are people that your kids play basketball and football with, and you don't want to cause any friction between that. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of times, a lot of black people in this community, and I know some people will call it coonish, but unless you are from this environment, you wouldn't understand why they do what they do. And it's to go along to get along. To make my life easier, I'm not even going to try to buck the system.
That's right.
I'm going to just do what I do and then go home at the end of the day, and I'll talk about the racism behind my own closed doors, but I'm not going to mention it in front of other white people. Like, this is stuff that we see all the time in our community. The crazy part is, last week, my man at work came up to me and he was like, "Hey man, we went to a real nice Juneteenth event." And I'm like,
What's that mean?
I'm like, where? You went to the one in Lynchburg and Roanoke, thrown by, the black people in the community? He's like, nah, we went to one in Madison Heights. Now, for the people who don't know the area that we're talking about, Bedford is predominantly white. Madison Heights is called Meth County, so that's predominantly white. This is good old boy town too. And I'm like, who the heck threw a Juneteenth joint in Madison Heights? He was like, it was some people from DC, white people. They came down here and threw a Juneteenth event real nice. And he was like, they even spoke. They had all kind of white speakers. He was like, I wish you could have been there. He's like, I wish you could have been there and spoke, because we needed somebody to represent us. But they did good, man. They did good. And I'm like, oh, word? And I'm walking away. And he was like, it was worth the $35. I said, wait a minute. I said, wait a minute, bro. Wait a minute. I said, some white people that ain't even from here came down here, through a Juneteenth event, and monopolized off of it, and y'all paid it? I said, man, though they had whitewashed Juneteenth beautifully and got us paying for it. And for the people who listen, that's the type of mindset is around the community that we're in, that they didn't even think about stuff like that. You know what I mean?
I'm glad you brought up Juneteenth Day, because I wanted to mention this before Juneteenth Day, before people ate their fucking hot dogs or whatever it is they did on Juneteenth Day. But I don't know that we really went into depth about everything regarding Juneteenth Day. Maybe we want to do that real quick too. I know it's after the fact, but I noticed that there's a lot of younger people watching this podcast. And with some of the things that's going on right now, Juneteenth Day is something that, unless we're passing the information along through other avenues, is going to get lost in the educational system. Mm-hmm. With a lot of the laws that they're passing now in states like Florida and Texas, and as I told you guys before, eventually Virginia, slavery is going to be taught completely different. It's going to be taught, we talked about it, actually we joked about it, but it is actually law in three states right now, which is they're going to teach slavery as something that benefited black folks. You heard correctly. It benefited black folks. It taught them useful skills. Mm-hmm. That's the way they're going to talk about slavery. So for Juneteenth Day, people want to know, why is Juneteenth Day important? And the first thing you'll hear most people say is that was the day that slavery ended. It is not.
It's incorrect.
That is incorrect. The thing is it was supposed to end with the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, 2 years prior to it reaching the borders of Texas in 1865.
Except for border states.
It
was supposed to end it in the Confederate states, not the border states.
And exactly, in the Confederate states, not the border states, just the Confederate states. And they found out about it in Texas two and a half years later. But it didn't end there. It still didn't end there. You had a lot of them were still imposing slavery. Some of it did it a different way by allowing them to work on the plantations, but still treating them as slaves.
Slavery by another name.
Exactly. But also, that created an avenue for them to start funneling slaves from the United States into other countries, like Brazil. So, at the end of the day, it didn't end slavery. And I don't know that a lot of people understand that. Also, there was people in Texas that knew that slavery had ended.
Right.
But there was nobody to enforce it.
Yeah, you need troops.
So once again, this is the same thing that happened with the civil rights movement 100 years later. Is that with the civil rights movement, we were not requesting or demanding or asking for a right to do anything. We already had the right. Mm-hmm. What we were asking for is the federal protections under the law to be able to practice those rights. Mm-hmm. That's what we were asking for. And so when you think about some of the things that happened in history, that happened again in the 60s, 1960s, it's happening again right now in reverse. As a matter of fact, a lot of the things that people don't know is occurring that we've talked about in this podcast as the possibility of happening. It is happening. The school system. We talked about the way that they're drawing the maps for voting districts, how it favors the white population so that you can end up with a Republican president. They're doing these things in South Carolina. They just had the Supreme Court rule that, no, the way they drew these lines are undiscriminatory. They're not racist. When the people who drew the map said, yeah, it is. So some of the things that I just want people to remember is, and also research, is that when it comes time to vote, and I through this podcast, I came to understand that this is not going to change things the way I probably thought they would, but you still have to have representation. You still have to have people like us in political positions that can have a vote to make change that positively impact the black community. Without that, you're never going to get that. So until then, we've talked about in this podcast many times, even when you live in a black community, you're still living in a state of segregation because you do not control any of the components in that community. Mm-mm. So that is a form of segregation and a form of oppression that we don't always talk about. You can live in a community, but you control none of the resources of that community. Nothing about that community are you in control of, or do you even have a vote for? So again, when it comes to the political realm, guys, do your research, get out and vote. It just happened. Guess what? You got Juneteenth Day. But in the meantime, they were doing all these other things behind the scenes to suppress black people's opportunities to vote, right? So it was one of those things where we'll give them one thing, but whole time the focus is really over here for white America and the government. That's the same thing that happened now. So they give us the Negro Leagues, right? You allow the records for the Negro Leagues to come into Major League Baseball, and everybody feels great about that, right? Yeah. But in the meantime, they're doing all this other stuff about not teaching slavery because obviously they don't want little white kids to feel bad. So this one of, I was reading this thing the other day. Speaking of Willie Mays, speaking of baseball, Willie Mays passed away this week.
Rest in peace.
With all the accomplishments, and I just want to go through a few of them because I think this is huge, only because we talk about Jackie Robinson a lot. Mm-hmm. And obviously we should, but I think there's a lot of other people we ought to be talking about too, not just Jackie Robinson. Willie Mays, the only player in history with at least 500 home runs, 3,000 hits, 2,000 runs scored, and 300 stolen bases. He had an average batting average for his career, 301. Actual total hits, 3,293. That's Derek Jeter type numbers, right? 660 home runs, 1,909 runs batted in. In 1948, he played for the Birmingham Black Barons of the Negro League, where he was known as Buck. In 1951 to 1952, he played for the New York San Francisco Giants, who eventually became the San Francisco Giants. Playing excellent defense, Mays was called up by the Giants in 1951. Initially, Mays was reluctant to accept the promotion because he did not believe he was ready to face major league pitching. The Giants manager called Mays directly and said, "Quit costing the ball club money with long distance phone calls and come play." And he did. And he was famously known as the Say Hey Kid because of the way he greeted people. Say who, say what, say hey. is how he greeted people. In 1951, the Giants played my beloved Yankees, which included my favorite Yankee of all times, which was Joe DiMaggio. And that happened to be Willie Mays' favorite player. They lost in that World Series to the Yankees in 6, I believe. And ironically, I was always trying to figure out why did Joe DiMaggio's career not last as long as I thought it should. It was because in that game 5 in that series, Willie Mays hit a ball to the outfield, and Joe DiMaggio was called off so Mickey Mantle can catch the ball, and Mickey Mantle hurt his knee in that game, and said Joe DiMaggio blamed himself for that for many, many years, and it shortened Mickey's career. But with all the things, and I just want to go through a couple more.
Hold on, we're gonna take. And we are back. Sorry about that, y'all. I'm gonna have to get a new laptop here. So, Pops, you can finish going on.
Back to Willie Mays. Came to the major leagues in 1951. Won NL Rookie of the Year that year. 1952, played in the World Series. Lost to my beloved Yankees in 6. Then after that, he went to fight in the Korean War from 1952 to 1953, as he was drafted into the military. After returning from that service in 1954 through 1972, he played for the San Francisco Giants, who had moved from New York to San Francisco in 1958. Played for the Mets for the last 2 years of his career. In that time span, he had 24 All-Star Game appearances.
Damn.
He was a World Series champion in 1954. Won the Roberto Clemente Award in 1971. 12 Gold Glove Awards, which is still the record today for outfielder. Won the National League Batting Championship in 1954. Led the league in home runs 4 years. Stolen base leader for 4 years. Hit 4 home runs in 1 game in 1961. Led the National League center fielders in double plays 5 times and assists 3 times. He was a classic example of what they call a 5-2 baseball player. Just tons of accomplishments. Inducted into the Hall of Fame in 1979 as first ballot, 94.7%. With all that, all those accomplishments, and he was the best of the best, and not only in the 50s but also in the 60s. Through all of that, to me, that's still not his greatest accomplishments. And I implore that everybody Google Willie Mays, go to Wikipedia and look at all his accomplishments. But with all of that, to me, again, that wasn't his greatest accomplishment. To me, it was overcoming the racial barriers, just as Jackie Robinson. But here's when a step further. When he first moved to San Francisco, when the New York Giants moved to San Francisco, he was faced with housing discrimination. When the Giants moved, Mays tried buying a home in exclusive Sherwood Forest neighborhood. The seller refused his offer after the neighborhoods complained about the black family moving in. The housing discrimination made newspaper headlines across the country. Willie Mays faces problem of home, and Willie Mays is refused in trying to buy a San Francisco home. And then the mayor stepped in and talked to the seller and said, you got to make it happen. And made it happen. And not just for Willie, but for a lot of other black people trying to move into some of these neighborhoods in in San Francisco. And this was in 1957. 1957.
Not that long ago for people
The
listening.
Fair Housing Act didn't occur in 1968. So this was more than 10 years before the Fair Housing Act of 1968. So to me, that was probably the greatest accomplishment of his major league career, is what he did off the field.
Right.
And refusing to give up. He refused. He was like, absolutely, I'm buying a house in this neighborhood. Nothing's going to deter me from doing it. The funny thing is as I was typing this still goes on today. there's neighborhoods that still do not want black people living in them.
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure. It's funny because my wife was asking me yesterday. She was like, because my wife's pregnant, for the people who don't know, and she was asking about getting into a pool. She was like, "Is there any pool we can get in around here, like social club?" I'm like, "You think the social clubs around here want you, your black ass in their pool?" And she was telling her again, like we talked about earlier, that somebody from our community, like an older lady, was like telling her one day, like, yeah, like those clubs, those country clubs, they don't want black people as members. Like I said, I had a conversation I would like to have on here. Like I said, I got a bunch of stuff to talk about. We'll get to it on the next episode, but I was just thinking about this earlier. I had talked to you about this before, about when it happened. First thing I'll say, like I said, my wife's pregnant. Planned Parenthood is exciting. When you planned it, you went through the process, and you're building and coming into bringing new life in here. I do have a 13-year-old daughter, but that process was a lot different because I was no longer with her mother and missed out on a lot of different things during the pregnancy itself. But just being able to be up close and personal to this pregnancy with my wife as we formulate a plan, my parent tendencies, her parent tendencies, and trying to put all this together, it is exciting.
It's almost like your first time again.
It is. But I told my brother, that I'm excited, but I'm afraid at the same time. And as a black man that's going to be raising a black boy to become a man in America, it is scary. It is scary. And I talked about on this podcast before, that 48% of black children live without their resident dad. That's the lowest proportion since 1973.
Right.
That black fathers are becoming more involved in their children's lives, to the point where black fathers who live with their children were more likely to bathe their children, dress their children, change their children, help potty train their children, compared to white and Hispanic fathers. These black fathers were also more likely to have eaten a meal with their children and be active during their daily lives. So we're seeing black fathers really rise up to the occasion and go away with that stereotype. But as we look at raising a black boy into this world, it's just the things that come to my head on, how do you let a black boy be emotional? How do you teach them how to control their emotions in a society where the black man is supposed to be the strong person that's not supposed to show those type of tendencies? But how do you combat that with helping them deal with certain things in a certain way? We're treated how we're treated in America. We know the conversations we got to have with our kids when you go to school. Hey, you're not going to be treated like the white kids. The things that they get away with, you're not going to get away with, without teaching them to just be a victim, to just have victim mentality. Black children have a higher tendency to be accused of something or labeled as something. We're kind of looked at as like a target in America. And I just want y'all perspective on, just raising a black young man in this world. Like, how do you do it? And for the people that's listening, like in the comment section, just advice on, because raising a black daughter versus raising a black son, it seems like it's going to be night and day.
It is night and day. I think the amazing part is seeing your child act the way that you knew you acted, and there's nothing you could do about it to get that shit out of them because it's in them. And the other amazing part is, I give you an example. My oldest son is 11, and he's probably bigger, taller, and size-wise bigger than your average 11-year-old. The problem is his personality is laid back. So he's not the physical kid. He can be physical if he wants to, but that's not his first nature. He's like his mom. He's not, he's kind-hearted. He's chill. If we at a basketball game and all his friends is going crazy, he's the one sitting there not really saying nothing. He's to himself. So that hurts him in sports, because in sports you have to be physical. And what I had to learn was, instead of yelling at him about being physical, because he would cry. And it's like, as a man, you like, bro, we on the football field and you crying. Just tell me why you crying. Let it out. Because I remember as kids, if you cried on the football, hey man, you acting like a girl.
Yeah.
Why you acting like that? Boys don't act like that. No, boys do act like that because they have emotions. And at that age, they don't know what to do with those emotions. They don't know how to express those emotions. And the first thing as men, as we do, we suppress those emotions.
Right.
So men are the first step to your kid or your son suppressing their emotions, because that's what we tell you. You're not supposed to show them. You wearing them on your sleeve. Don't do that. Don't show people that you out here crying on this basketball court. Don't do that. Because we're looking at it as how it makes me look, not how they're feeling.
Right.
So for my son, what I did was, hey, talk to me. Why are you crying? Why are these things occurring? So, and then also on top of that, my son has dreads. I mean, so he's going to fit the description of a lot of criminals just because he has dreads. And I've told this story on this podcast a few months back. Y'all can go back and listen to it, about how he got perceived and drug into something because he had dreads. But it's definitely hard. I'm learning every day as I go. I ask dad questions, and then there's some things that you have to let life play out, and then you teach them as the life play as those life lessons occur.
Yeah, it's the crazy part is because, as a black man having a black son, one of the first comments I got from people was like, "Oh, he gonna be nice at basketball. He gonna be nice at football," and I'm like, that's not even what I want for him.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? If that person, I'm not pushing sports on my child just because he's a black kid. Like, if he wants to do something else with his life, then I'll gravitate towards that. But I'm not pushing them just because they're a black kid and they might have speed or might be tall or whatever the case may be. And even just in black culture, like I tell my wife all the time, like, because you used to say that one of your biggest regrets was buying us Jordans at an early age. Right. When we didn't even know what it meant, but we just wanted it because that's what everybody else had. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm like, yeah, we don't need Nike tech suits for a newborn. You know what I'm saying? Like, we don't need Nike shoes and all this other name brand stuff for a newborn, because black culture says that that's what we're supposed to be wearing. Right. Like, we don't have to push those agendas just so our kid. But then on the flip side, you don't want your kid being teased. Right. You don't want your kid being bullied because he's not buying into that culture look. Just your perspective on it.
The first about the Jordans.
About all of it.
The Jordans is I did regret buying it, but the one thing that I taught you guys that you still do today is you took care of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you guys took care of your things. So it was important to you to have them, and then it became more important to you to take care of them. Mm-hmm. So I regret buying them because I think I set the standard for you guys. But you did what you're supposed to do once you had them, which was good.
Oh, now I go in the store. I'm looking for the Reebok Classics.
yeah. So, but and what you're talking about in terms of how to raise the child to be in this society and be what I call black and proud but safe is tough. But it's gonna take me a minute to get through this, but I want you to listen to me because this is very important. When you hear the term indoctrination, we look at it as something bad because a lot of times it's teaching people to believe something that's not true. What if you can believe something that is true? And I'll give you an example. Everything about who we are and who we say we are is based on hearsay. Mm-hmm. But we buy into it and it becomes a fact. I'll give you an example. My name is Jerome Battle. How do I know that? It's hearsay. Mm-hmm. You know why? because nobody verified that was my name. What happened is my parents told someone else, this is the child's name, and they put it on the birth certificate, and that he was a male. That person that's documenting this and is stamping it didn't come in and see if I had the tools to be a man, right? A boy. They didn't come in there and check that. They took the word of other people and put that on the document, right? So at the end of the day, everything about me is based on hearsay. These parents who said they are the parents said his name is this. And this person says that it is a male child. And he was born in this time on this date. Nobody verified any of that. But to this day, I believe my name is Jerome Battle. See how easy it is to get people to buy into something that is theoretically hearsay, right? We live by that. What if you could get your child to believe the truth about everything he is and will be? What if you could do that? What if you could teach them his history and have him believe it and go into society knowing it, but have the understanding that I can't tell everybody everything?
And that's one of the things I want to ask you about real quick, because like we just talked about the community that we come from, the how it's predominantly white and the notions and all of the other stuff. Teaching the kid to be black and proud and carry that pro-blackness, can that get diminished if you're the only black kid in the classroom?
No. And I'll tell you why. You represent black no matter what you do and how you do it. I don't even care how you look. If you're black, you represent black people. Whether you want to or not, it's incumbent upon you. It's innately inherited that you represent black people. Ain't nothing you can do about it. So if you're the only black in that class and you kicking ass and you're just as smart as anybody in that class, no, you're not diminishing anything. You can still be black and proud, and you can be an example to two people. White people in that classroom,
Facts.
and to the black people that's not in that classroom, that at the end of the day see you come out of that classroom smiling and carrying your books and moving on. That motherfucker did it.
Yeah.
He did that shit. So it's all in pride and dignity is something that you do not have to earn. It's just who you are. You just have to know it. So what does it help the people who don't have it to go into a classroom and see a picture of Barack Obama as the president of the United States? Absolutely. But for the kids that already have it, when they go in that classroom and see him, they go, "That's right.
Yeah.
Already know it. I'm good.
Yeah.
Good to see that."
And I talked to you already because you're developing the pictures for his room because we wanted black superheroes. And we've got books with black children on them and black history cartoons, because that's what we want him to see when he's in his room. We want to see that positive black imagery from the jump. And whenever we're done with it, I'll post clips of the room when we're done, because we do want that imagery to start off, as we talked about on this podcast.
It's important. You know, when I was a kid, I know everybody had a superhero. You know, everybody had a favorite superhero. Like mine was Green Lantern. Didn't know at the time that the original Green Lantern was black.
For sure.
Right? Didn't know that at the time.
For sure.
But I like Green Lantern.
They're supposed to be doing something like a new one with that, right?
Yes. However, my hero in life was not a superhero. Was not a fictitious character on TV. Was not a celebrity, entertainer, athlete. Wasn't none of that. My first hero was my dad. That was my first hero. You know, I still remember when my dad told me, I think I was 7 years old, my dad told me ain't no fucking Santa Claus. Right? He said, I refuse to do everything I do on a regular basis to have you niggas think for a second that some white man is bringing all this shit to you on Christmas.
Hey, you said
Ain't
just
happening.
like
I refuse to have that happen in my house. I'm going to let you know, I'm Santa Claus. I'm all that shit. And I'm making it happen. Right? My nigga. That's my hero. Right? You was honest with us. But at the same time, we got the gifts, because at the end of the day, I don't care what nobody says. That's the most important thing, is we get the gifts, right? All that other shit, who cares? We knew the minute you left cookies for Santa Claus, he was like, yeah, Santa Claus ain't getting no motherfuckers. You ain't getting them cookies. You know, and we live in the hood. Ain't no white people coming in the hood without everybody seeing them. So all this shit didn't make sense to us as a kid. My dad made it make sense. He was honest with us. Now, I'm not saying that every parent ought to be honest with a 7-year-old. I'm not saying that. But in my community during that time, it helped us that my dad was brutally honest with us. Not saying that that's going to be the case with your son, right? There's going to be times that you're going to want to be honest with him, and at times you're not. And you're going to have to wait until he's ready for you to be honest. There's no, Planned Parenthood is great. But nobody's going to be able to give you a roadmap through this because they don't know, they don't know what you've been through. Only you know that. Right. You have to write the roadmap for your parenting, and you're writing it as you go. Right. You're editing it as you go. And it's okay. That's fine. That's not a right or wrong. What you have to determine is how much of you do you want that child to be? And I say this all the time when it came to you guys. I didn't want you guys to be another version of me. That wouldn't have been good for you or the community, right? I'm just being honest, right? That wouldn't have been good for you guys, and damn sure wouldn't have been good for the community for you to be another me. I wanted you guys to be everything but me. And in a sense, what that means is I wanted you guys to be the best versions of you, no matter what that is. We talk about sports. You say somebody forced you to play football. I never forced you. So I'm taking me out the. I'm gonna take me out the equation.
Somebody sound.
My thing is whatever you guys wanted to do, I wanted to support you in that, no matter what it was. If you wanted to play an instrument, I'd have bought it. Right? If you wanted to do ballet, I'm taking you to lessons. Whatever it is, right? Doesn't matter. That doesn't always happen in the black community. You don't normally hear black boys say they want to do ballet. And we as parents cannot let things from our generation impact what we don't want our kids to do or be involved in.
Right.
Now, this has nothing to do with sexuality. I'm not going to get into that. Right? But in terms of what they want to do, if your child wants to do something and they feel compelled, this is something I really want to do. Because every kid say they want to play basketball until they get out there and then they go, you know what, I don't want to play basketball.
Right.
Right? So, but you have to let them explore. You have to let them figure out what it is they want to do. And then what they're good at. Because what they do and what they're good at might be two different things. And they may never get good at the things that they want to do. So you might have that conversation at some point. If you got a child that want to play baseball and they can't catch it, they can't hit it, they can't throw it, at some point you might have to go to them and say, at 14, you might want to pick something else. Yeah. Because now at 14, it's really too late for you to develop to be that kid that's going to actually play in the game, right? You're just going to be that extra that's going to be out there for the limited amount of time that you need according to whatever the rules and regulations are.
We're not doing that.
You have to decide what that is. And I'll be the first to admit, I was one of the parents that said, we ain't doing that. If my kids aren't playing, we ain't playing, right? That's me. And I'm not saying that was the right thing to do. I'm just saying I'm not going to stand out here in 110-degree weather on the football field if your ass sitting on the bench. Ain't happening,
You see, I took that same motto with my kids. The only difference is if you want to play it, like Sonny, she only played softball 1 year, and everybody was amazed that was her first year. Yeah, because if it's something that you want to play, if you never done it before, then we got to work. If you're not going to work, then we're not playing. We're not just going to be out there playing in the dirt and stuff like that. But also, babe, I also, and this is just in my opinion, I can't tell you how to feel. I think a lot of things you might be overthinking, because a lot of things that he might deal with, ain't nobody to hear better from but you. Being the only black kid in the class full of, that was you.
Yeah, the funny thing is, and he can listen to this when he get older, but I wanted another daughter just so another version of me is just wild to think about. Another male version of me is just wild to think about.
But the other thing, we talk about teaching, right? You're going to teach them certain things. You're going to show examples. You're going to be an example. Even from Barisha, she's going to be an example. She's going to teach them things. The other thing that I did I didn't have no money. You know, as a parent, I didn't have no money. You know, but what I did have is I had time, and I dedicated a lot of my time to you guys. I made myself available. You know, I tell this story at work all the time that I sacrificed money for the flexibility in the jobs that I took when you guys were kids. I wanted to be available for every school play, every instrument recital, no matter how bad you guys play the instrument or sing, whatever. I wanted to be there. Every practice, every game, anything involving you guys, Dad wanted to be there. So that means if I had to go to work late or get off early or not go at all and work on the weekend or work from 11 at night to 7 in the morning so I could be available, every doctor's appointment, I wanted to be there. I sacrificed a lot of things, including relationships. Unfortunately, you guys heard some of those conversations. I'm not proud of those, but I am proud that I made a decision to sacrifice those things to give the only thing that I really had, which was time. And I gave you guys that. But sacrifice comes in so many different facets, and people think sacrifice is bad. But when you read in any religious sector about sacrifice, sacrifice is good.
Yeah.
So when you sacrifice, don't look at it as being, I put my things to the side, things that were important to me to the side. That's not what that means. Sacrifice means this is more important to me, and I can't do these other things that are important. They're just not equally important. Because your job is important, because I can't take care of you guys if I don't have a job.
Right.
But what can you do?
Yeah.
So you have to look at what can you do. Those are the sacrifices.
Right.
Not the things that you can't do, no matter what side you choose. It's the things that you can do. And for me, it was the sacrifices that I made so that I could give you the only thing that I really had was time. But I did not want you guys to become me. I didn't want to have that kind of influence on you. That's why a lot of things about me personally, you guys didn't find out till you were adults. Because I didn't want you to be anything like me. Nothing like me at all. To the point that when I first started hearing people say, Jerome, I think your kids will beat you in basketball. 9 out of 10 people that you would say that to, they would go, shit, my kid can't beat me no one-on-one. When they started saying that to me, you know what I would say? I hope they can. They will never find out because I stopped playing them, but I hope they can. I want them to be better than I ever was at anything, more importantly, at life.
And you know, the one thing, you know, and I understand now from this perspective why you used to say that you wanted us to be nothing like you. It wasn't about the good part of you. It was about what curses did I pass down?
That's right.
You know what I'm saying? Because there's things that I went through that when I called you and told you I was going through it, you was like, damn, I was hoping you was going to avoid this.
That's right.
Because it's something, the way that you thinking about the situation is the same way I think about the situation.
Absolutely.
And it's just for me, and I'm like, we're going to have those conversations.
That's
you know
right.
what I'm saying? But
And that's the fun part is having those conversations like Sonny. Like Sonny is, that would be me in a girl form. Because
yeah, she
like,
act just like it.
Yeah, so a lot of things that she do, like a lot of times, like I won't say it, but my face will say it. That's her. Like her face will say it, but and it's a lot. And a lot of times I look at him like, "Son, you can't look like that." But I can't do that because that's me. But and I think also the other fun part is when your kid is going through something, and I say it all the time, like when a woman has a baby for the first time and to see her go into mommy mode like that is amazing. Like, where did that come from? And for fathers is when your son or daughter is going through something and you have to talk to them about it, the way that you're able to come up with a story, whether it's true or not, to tell them.
You might fabricate
right.
You might fabricate
It's been times where Brittany asked me, like, after I had a conversation with our kids, like, did that really happen? Nah, it was made up.
Like on Remember the Titans?
Yeah.
5, 6 brothers and sisters?
Yeah, but you made it up. You make it up as you go. Like, that's the fun part.
We appreciate y'all. We love y'all. Hope y'all be back for the next episode. Peace.